In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
Welcome to Doomed Fail, the podcast where we evaluate other people's tragic relationships so we don't have to evaluate our own. I'm Farz, joined by my co-host Taylor, and every week we'll be bringing you two tales, one historic and one true crime related, of relationships that were doomed to fail. Taylor, what is our signature drink today?
Well, today I will be talking about Catherine the Great, who was Empress of Russia.
Signature drink.
No, I know. I'm getting there.
Oh.
And the signature drink, because talking about Russia, is just vodka.
Love it.
No mixers, no tonic, nothing. Just let's do some shots of vodka. That's our signature drink from the alcoholic side.
Perfect. And on my side, the signature drink is going to be water, because we are going to be covering some teetotalers who strayed pretty far from their belief system. So with that said, let's go ahead and kick things off. Taylor, do you want to start us off?
Yes, I will. And you know what? Hello, Farz. I'm going to focus on historical relationships that were doomed to fail. Kings and queens and emperors and arranged marriages and a lot of violence and coups and that sort of thing. I might talk about some more modern ones later, but right now we're going to start in the 1700s. And so I mentioned already, I'm talking about Catherine the Great. It's a little bit selfish because I do have a podcast that I've been thinking about doing for like years and have not done about America's first ladies. And what is cool and what I want to talk about there and talk about here is that we're in the Enlightenment. We are in like the late 1700s. This is the same time that like in America, there's Martha Washington, and then also there's Marie Antoinette, and also there's Catherine the Great. So like a lot of really like interesting stuff is happening like with women and with rulers and with like revolutions around this time. Make sense? Do you know where we are?
Yep.
Okay. So, yeah, in general, I just freaking love it. I think it's really fun that all these people lived at the exact same time. Have you seen Hamilton?
I have not, but I've heard the playlists of Hamilton.
Got it. So I feel like this reminds me of, when the women are like, how lucky are we to be alive right now? Like, that's how I feel about this time in history. It's just like super exciting. I have some sources. So, how lucky you are to be alive right now. This is Enlightenment. Super exciting things are happening in the world, on the globe. My sources are, I read 2 books on Catherine the Great in 2021 during pandemic reading time. The first one is called Catherine the Great by Robert K. Massey. It was okay. The last quarter of it is just like a list of people that she slept with. And like, there's more to life than that.
You gotta know.
Yeah. Well, I don't want just like, your biography isn't going to be like a list of people you slept with, I hope. Or
I hope that's not the case.
I mean, like maybe it'd be interesting for like a little bit, but after a while you'd be like, okay, good for you. Whatever. So that one was okay. But book 2 that I read was better. It was called Great Catherine by Carolee Erickson. So that's the one that I recommend reading for this. So I read those in 2021, and then I did some Wikipedia and ChatGPT stuff to like jog my memory. And then also, have you seen the show The Great on Hulu?
I have not.
Oh my gosh. So it says it's a mostly true story because it's not very true. It's like some things are true, different timelines or whatever, but essentially it's Catherine the Great and her husband, Peter III. It's super sexy. Everyone is like really cool. And in real life, they were not. It is not that sexy or that cool. But definitely still watch it because it gives you like the vibe of being in Russia. And that's where they do the tons of shots of vodka and then they just throw their glass on the ground and go, huzzah.
Did they have indoor plumbing back then?
No. Mm-mm.
So how sexy could it have really been?
That's such a good question because not that sexy.
Yeah,
because
not very.
Yeah, no, I feel like people didn't shower that much. Well, definitely not shower, but didn't bathe that much. A lot of like heavy makeup and like powdered wigs, and you're totally right. No running water. There's a story that is not in my story, but to share is someone was like, "Oh, I got a new summer house." Essentially, and all of like the royalty went to the summer house, and in the middle of the night, half of it collapsed into a lake, and there were rats everywhere.
Not great.
That was just like normal, and that was like a nice house.
Yeah, not fantastic. So no indoor plumbing and no architects. Got it.
Yeah, no, they're dirty, they're a little sticky, they're also cold because you're in Russia, um, and you're really, really far from the rest of Europe, and you're isolated, like Russia is and always has been. Feels isolated, both, physically and like culturally. Um, Before we go to Russia, we're gonna go to Prussia. Have you heard of Prussia? Do you know what that was?
I feel like that was the opening scene in the Gladiator movie from forever ago, was them being in Prussia, and that is the extent of my knowledge of Prussia.
Maybe I don't remember that, but sure. I'm sure they probably are. It's like where Germany is and like northern area of Germany, because Germany became a country like very recently, like in the beginning of the 1900s, like it was like a collection of different states and different like places. So we're in Germany. Catherine the Great was born. Sophie Friederike August von Anhalt-Zerbst-Dornberg in
That's
1729.
that was impressive.
Thank you. I tried. It's a long ass name. She was like minor royalty. So like not someone who was like gonna be queen, but she was like kind of like hung out in those circles. Her mom, Joanna Elizabeth of Holstein Gottorp, had to get her married to someone like soon to be able to like up their family status. That was her mom's goal. In The Great, she's played by Gillian Anderson, and it's very sexy and fun. But in real life, she kind of sucked. She was kind of awful. And so she wants to strengthen Prussia's relationship with Russia. And so is going to send her daughter to Russia to marry Peter III, who is, well, he's not Peter III yet, but he's going to be, and he's in line to be the emperor of Russia. So that's where she's sending Sophie, her daughter, over there. This also leads to things like, have you ever seen that? I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. You're going to be like, no, what are you talking about? Have you seen that picture of King George, Kaiser Wilhelm, and Tsar Nicholas together right before World War
Yes.
One?
Surprisingly so, yes.
Nice, nice. So this is the start of that. So everyone's going to be related. We're going to have a lot of cousins and relationships like across Europe before all the world wars. I'm excited that you've seen that photo. That's really fun.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that you asked me if I saw something, and I actually had. So kudos to me.
Oh my gosh, I love it. So Peter the Third will be Peter the Third. They actually met when they were kids. They were second cousins. She didn't like him because he was a wet noodle. So I feel like I might be describing people in terms of their noodle wetness. And he's a wet one. Like the last noodle in the pot that's like stuck on the bottom and you can't get it off the pot when you're trying to clean.
Hold on. So the two people that are supposed to get together are cousins.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Okay.
Just like, Queen Elizabeth and what's his face that just died. They're cousins.
Learning a lot. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's kind of par for the course in royalty is that there's going to be a lot of cousins getting married. So they're second cousins. So like, whatever. So Joanna says, I want to get my daughter to marry someone who is rich. All these bachelors everywhere. There's like King Louis in France. Like all stuff is happening. I got to get my girl in front of a guy. So she sends him to Russia. She goes with goes with her daughter to Russia, blah, blah, blah. And they stay there for a little bit. The Empress Elizabeth, currently running Russia, likes her, doesn't like her mom, sends her mom home. And then Sophie lives in Russia then forever. She never sees her mom again. She also never sees her dad again. When she left Prussia, her dad was like, promise me you won't convert to Russian Orthodoxy. And she does like immediately when she gets to Russia. Because one of Catherine's big things is like, I am Russian. I'm going to learn the language. I'm going to talk to the people. And that was a big part of her ruling style like later on. So I actually have a fun quote from the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica describing Peter and his like wet noodleness. So you can kind of get a better idea of what he was like. And I'll show you a picture of him. You'll be like, oh, okay. I mean, not a picture, like a painting, but like they couldn't even make it flattering. But in the encyclopedia, it said, nature had made him mean, smallpox had made him hideous, and his deranged habits made him loathsome. And Peter had all the sentiments of the worst kind of small German prince of the time. He had a conviction that his princeship entitled him to disregard decency and the feelings of others. He planned brutal practical jokes in which blows had always a share. His most manly taste did not rise above the kind of military interest which had been defined as a corporal's mania, the passion for uniforms, pipe clay buttons, the tricks of parade, and the froth of discipline. He detested the Russians and surrounded himself with Holsteiners. So he wasn't great.
He doesn't sound like a picnic to be in a relationship with, at the very least.
And when I say like when they say corporal's mania, like he would play with toy soldiers until he was very old. And then once he got more power, he would make his serfs and his servants dress like soldiers, but not Russian soldiers, like Prussian soldiers, and then play toy soldiers with real people.
So kind of like a Kevin Spacey from House of Cards.
Yeah.
And then maybe a Kevin Spacey in real life as well.
But like, yeah, but like less manly.
Oh, I don't know if I agree with that. But carry on. I'll go with your interpretation.
Like if that's possible. I think come like shorter at least.
Sure.
I feel like he's shorter. I don't know how tall he was, but I don't know how tall Kevin Spacey is either, but shorter. Anyway, Peter barely spoke Russian, played with his toy soldiers. Sometimes they were real people. So he actually was not born in Russia either. He was born in like another Prussian Holstein area in Northern Europe, and was brought to Russia because his aunt, Elizabeth, was the empress and needed an heir. So she was considering him to be an heir. He's actually the grandson of Peter the Great, but very far removed from any of that greatness. So
let me pause there.
Ask me questions. Yes.
I feel like the red flag in this relationship is like who these people are.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like Peter is the worst match for anybody. Yeah. And this poor girl was ripped from her homeland and her family to marry a cousin who's also a stranger. It just all sounds bad.
Yeah. No,
okay.
I feel like any arranged thing I feel like is probably red flag. Any like, especially if it's like for royal purposes, like to enhance the relationship between Prussia and Russia. It's not to like because you like each other or because like maybe you like each other or like we might whatever. It's like all about land. It's all about like getting power. It's doesn't matter if it's your cousin. So like it's definitely a little Game of Thronesy because it's just like power and incest and all of that stuff. So I think that obviously is a huge red flag. And then Peter's just like not mature enough to be in a relationship. He's never had to be, and he doesn't understand like what it would take emotionally to be in a relationship with someone. But I didn't know if that was a thing then. Yeah.
Doesn't sound good. Yeah, we'll probably get to this later, but do we know if they were in love at any point or
they weren't? No.
Okay,
no.
Of course not. Of course.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, definitely not. Like she gets there, she's 16 when they get married, and she goes there in 1744. She gets married, her mom leaves. She starts to just like really fully be like, I am going to be Russian. So she learned, like I said, she learns Russian. She becomes friends with the empress. Empress likes her. She starts to like get involved with the Russian community. She's also reading a lot of stuff because she speaks Russian and French and Latin and German and blah blah blah. So she's like corresponding with Voltaire and like really trying to like bring these Western ideas to Russia because Russia is like way behind everyone else, like economically, infrastructure wise. And part of that is because of the isolation, like it's cold as shit. You have to take a sled to get there. That's how far away it is. It's not like easy to get to. So Catherine's now the Grand Duchess, Ekaterina Alexeyevna, but so no longer Sophie. She's Ekaterina, she's Catherine. And her and Peter get married, and she's, reading and doing all this stuff, but she's not having babies. And the question is like, why isn't she having babies? It's been like a couple of years. Like, what's going on? And the rumor is Peter just didn't know how. Like no one told him how.
To what?
To make a baby.
Oh, the whole process.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay.
Quite simple process of baby making. He just didn't know. So
it's not always simple.
Like maybe they like slept in the same bed, but they just like never, it was never consummated. They never had, didn't do that. So eventually he figures it out. Someone tells him. Like it's pretty much like a drunk bros around a thing and then being like, so Peter, your wife is not pregnant. What's going on? And he's like, oh, we're hugging a lot. I don't know, and then someone like tells him how babies are made. And then he's like, oh, and then he gets a mistress because he's like, that sounds fun.
Yeah. He sounds like he learned how most of us learn from bros. Well, not bros, more so like in middle school probably, but yeah.
Yes, exactly. So he's like mentally there. He's like mentally in middle school. So Catherine's like, okay, fine. Well, then I'll also like take a lover. And so she, they both have relationships, which is super normal in this time also. Like a king or queen will have a favorite, someone who is like their person to like, have sex with and not worry about like, getting pregnant so much, because ideally, like, your wife would just be constantly having babies, because half of them are going to die. You got to get a boy, all that kind of thing.
Right.
Makes sense. Like, did you watch House of the Dragon?
No, but everybody tells me to, but I'm going to be a contrarian and wait until it's done and then watch it the way I did with Breaking Bad.
Anyway, spoiler alert, like 75 women die in childbirth. So like it's the same idea where like everyone's dirty, and if the baby's like not coming out perfectly, you're going to die. So they just have various lovers. That's totally normal and totally fine. But they're trying to, get to power in Russia, and they have a little bit of a idea to do a coup against Elizabeth, and who is, Peter's aunt. She's a current empress. They're in line to be next, but they're trying to overthrow her. Elizabeth finds out and says, "Listen, you guys got to give me an heir, and I won't have you killed," essentially. So they do. They do make a baby. His name is Paul. He's a boy. He does become emperor of Russia eventually. He is also a wet noodle, which I think is proof of his parentage, is that he's a wet noodle just like his dad.
It is interesting. They named him Paul. It's like Paul's the guy you study with at the library. Like you want something more powerful than like an Ivan, or I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
I have an Ivan in this story.
Perfect.
So this timeline is whack. So please, if anyone is a Russian historian, don't come to my house and kill me. But Elizabeth is empress of Russia when they're there. She became empress by overthrowing Emperor Ivan, who was 2 months old. So Emperor Ivan was just 2 months old. He was like, a baby, and she was like, "Fuck this! I'm even though I'm a woman, I'm still going to do it." So she put him in jail, and he was in jail for 20 years. And then one day there were people who were like trying to help him escape, and they accidentally killed him.
Wow, lots of bad luck.
Yeah.
He didn't have the stones at 2 months old to withstand a coup, I take it.
Yeah. So Ivan didn't make it, but he was also someone who could have been emperor, but he wasn't. So we have Paul eventually. So now, they're hanging out. Peter has a mistress who's rumored to just like be awful, just like not very nice, like not pretty. People are like, "Why do you have this terrible woman as your mistress?" But he like loved her. So that's like Peter's great love is this woman, and Catherine's great love is a man named Gregory Orlov. And he's a general, and he's like, "You're so smart. We know better than Peter. Like, we have to be prepared to overthrow him when he becomes emperor." And they start thinking about that and planning that for a really, really long time.
Did nobody they were surrounded by people. This would have been so clear that something was going to be going awry at some point when your wife is hooking up with the guy who controls the military.
Yeah.
No, he didn't see this coming, I take it.
I think he just like doesn't care because he's doing like kid stuff,
like he's playing with like toy soldiers, and he's probably just talking to this woman who's his what is
right.
it?
His mistress.
What would she be? Mistress, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, totally. So he's just like not really. I don't think he's all there. Like, he just wants to play. He also has a lot of plans to like align with Prussia and like side with them in like different wars and things where Russia really wouldn't do that. So, he's just kind of like busy doing his own things. They don't live together. There's like all sorts of things. Like they're pretty separated. And then, so Elizabeth, who is empress, she dies in 1762, and Peter becomes emperor. He is emperor for about 6 months. That's as long as he makes it. So he's making everybody really mad. But he does pass like 200 new laws. So there's actually a little bit that I was reading where like maybe he's not the worst, and like new like historians are like being like, well, he did some progressive things. He definitely wanted to separate like church and state, and like he wasn't like the worst human ever. Maybe he's like a not soaking wet noodle. But I don't know. I didn't read a lot about that, but he did a bunch of stuff. So 200 new laws in his first 6 months. Catherine's just like smarter than him, and people can see that, and she's like doing this thing, and people are excited about her. So in July 1762, 6 months after Elizabeth dies, Peter starts to actually get a little nervous. He's like, "Oh, I can see you're hanging out with people that maybe could not want me to be emperor." So he finally
catching on. Yeah.
So he has them all arrested. So Catherine said it happens like in the middle of the night, in one day, all of a sudden all her people are arrested. And like she's like, I don't know what, getting letters from horses. I don't know. Like it's like happening really fast. And she's like, so she runs to where the soldiers are and she says, listen, everyone, you need to protect me from my husband. He's going crazy. He arrested my friends. Like he's the bad guy. I want to be in charge of Russia. I will do a better job than him. And she says the same thing to the clergy, and everybody fucking loves it. They're like, this sounds great. Like it's been rumors, people have been talking about it. So they all swear allegiance to her, and they do this like weird thing with like boats where like Peter's on a boat and she's on a boat and she's like, oh my God, just give up. He like tries to run away. Then he gives up and she makes him sign over abdication papers. So she is now empress.
I love how directly the parallel here is when a relationship breaks up and you have shared mutual friends, and it's like, are you my friend or are you his friend? It's the exact same thing, except with like armies and
exactly
people of the court, I guess.
Exactly. And like 90% of them chose her, because they were like, you seem like at least you fucking speak our language, like if they knew nothing, like they knew that. So Catherine says, okay, thank you for signing this over. I'm going to send you to jail for a little bit and then we'll talk later. Like, that sounds great. But guess what happens?
She kills him.
Yeah, they never talk. He dies. He mysteriously dies in jail like 2 days later. So
it's just like all those people in Russia right now who get thrown out of like windows of hotels, basically.
Yeah, like, oh, that's crazy. Just like Ivan, who got killed by his people saving him. That makes no sense. You get killed when you're in a Russian jail. Probably.
Yeah, I could have guessed that. I could have presumed that.
Yeah. So Peter is now gone. They never had a chance to talk it out. He's just gone. And Catherine is Empress of Russia. And she rules Russia for 3 decades. She does a bunch of like cool modernizing reforms. Some stuff she doesn't do. She does have more kids. She meets, a couple other men who become her favorites. When she gets older, when she's like 60, she has this favorite like boyfriend who's like in his 20s, and she just like loves him, and they just have like such a good time together, and he dies and she's so devastated because he was like another person that she really loved. Orlov, he cheats on her a bunch, so she like kicks him out, but ends up still like hooking up with a bunch of people, which again is not the most interesting about her, but it happens. So she has more kids. She expanded the empire into Asia, into Europe. She was had an alliance with England, so she was really just kind of talking to everybody. And one of the cool things that she did first was she visited as much of Russia as possible, which is really, really hard. Like literally she was in a sled full of furs and like going across like the what's it called up there? The Russian
tundra, the Siberian steppe.
Yeah. So she's like doing all of that. She there's a big part of Russia that is Islam, so she's like cool with them. She's cool with different religions. She's like really doing that kind of stuff. She expands to paper money. She creates banks. The thing that's not great with any of the leaders during this time is their relation to like slavery and serfdom. So in Russia, they didn't really have the transatlantic slave trade. That's really how that's happening at this time. But they did have like, half of Russia was a serf, which is pretty much like you are indentured to, the person who owns your land, who owns their land, who owns their land. And it's pretty crappy way to live. So, that still happens. And the serfs are very much like, well, she's enlightened and all these things, but why are we still living this really shitty life? Which is like, yeah, why are you? But it's because the rich people are still like, we're still rich. She became a painter of the arts. Her art collection is now the Hermitage Museum in Moscow, right? Or St. Petersburg, or wherever it is. That's her collection. She invited a lot of people to Russia. She also inoculated people against smallpox. So she was like pro-vaccination and did it herself. So
did they also accuse her of embedding microchips in her or in them when they got vaccinated, or
no?
Was the concept was too foreign?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is like they were scared. People were scared, and then when they saw people didn't die from it, they did it themselves. So they like used logic to be like, oh, maybe this does work, and then did it, and then we're okay, rather than being like, I'm going to be mad about this forever and never do anything.
So the people in the 1700s Russia who have no running water were essentially more enlightened when it came to vaccines than modern day people. Got it.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
And then one of the last people that she was with, another like great love of her life, was General Potemkin. And did you ever see, this is far, the battleship Potemkin, which is like one of the first movies ever made?
Definitely did not see that.
It's
did
silent,
Michael Bay
obviously.
make it?
No, but I mean, honestly, it's like, this is what I remember from, I took like a film propaganda class in grad school, and it's like this it's a story of a battle, and the battleship's named Potemkin, and it's like coming up to port, and like I just remember people like falling down the stairs. I don't know why there's stairs because it's also a battleship, so I don't really understand. I should watch it again, but I just remember people falling down the stairs and rolling. But one of the first movies ever made in Russia in the world, and that's what I think of when I think of Potemkin. But then, so they were married. They actually like got secretly married. Most people think, and they were like pretty happy towards like the end of her life. He ended up leaving her to go out and like do army things to go out into battle, and then he ended up leaving her for several of his nieces. Like he dated several of his nieces, which is gross. And then he died, in his 50s, like pretty young, out in the battlefield. So another kind of gross incestual thing that was like happening then.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say those relationships were also doomed to fail.
Yes. His sister was like, "Can you stop dating my daughters?"
Ugh,
So gross. So, whatever. Catherine liked him, and that one didn't work out either. So when she died, she did have a favorite around, but she basically, she was married to Peter. She might have gotten married to Potemkin. She dated Orlov for a long time, dated, like they went to like dinner, but like they did the coup. They were together for a long time. And those are the great loves of her life. And she died on November 16th, 1796. People who didn't like her said that she died having sex with a horse.
Okay.
Which, might kill you and is not true. But she had a stroke, like old people do. So after her son, Paul, other wet noodle, became emperor, and made a bunch of bad decisions that led to the fall of the Russian Empire later.
Wow.
For World War I. So she was kind of the beginning of all of that, tried to do a lot for the Enlightenment. I think she was really successful in her life out in Russia, but definitely not meant to have like a fairy tale move to a place, marry the prince, become the queen. That part of the fairy tale was not in the cards for her.
So what would you say? I mean, this seems pretty obvious at this point, but what would you say are the clear red flags that were going on here?
I mean, I want to say like I think she made the best of that situation, because she could have done like Marie Antoinette also was in a very similar situation, just like married to someone random who sucked, and she did more like hang out in court, and the reasons that people feel the way they do about Marie Antoinette versus Catherine the Great, because she was like, I really want to do these things. I think that she wouldn't have had that opportunity if her husband had been more of a green flag.
Yeah.
Like if he had been like, hey, I'm awesome, and then she'd been really happy, then she would have had 10 kids with him, and she would have just been his there with him while he did all of his stuff, and she could have been happy doing that. But he sort of gave her the opportunity to do other things because he ignored her, and he was like playing with his friends and like doing stuff that like he didn't see her as a threat, and he should have.
Yeah.
But he didn't have the capacity to do that.
It sounds like it worked out for Catherine, and the fact that she has now gone down as history as Catherine the Great is a huge indicator of that.
Yeah, and he came from like a lineage of Peter the Great, and he's just like Peter,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wet noodle.
I don't
like wet noodles.
No.
Okay. Really interesting.
Cool. So that's the story of Catherine the Great, her wet noodle, Peter the Third, and their relationship that was never going to be super in love, but ended up making her very successful, which was always fun to see. And then Farz, I'm going to hand it over to you for give us something more recent. Give us some true crime relationships that turned bad. I'm nervous.
Yeah, let's get into true crime territory. Taylor, I think you and I, as well as a lot of our listeners, would classify as PhDs in true crime. And so the story I'm going to bring up, I'm just going to ask you at the top. Have you heard the name Lori Vallow before?
I have, yes.
Okay. So now you know why we're drinking water. I'll get into that a little bit in a moment. So my topic today is centered around Lori Vallow, who I just find tremendously fascinating. I should start by saying that her and this person that she was married to that we'll get to, their trials have not begun yet. And so all the facts aren't out, but editorial stance, she did it. They both did it. So that's just going to go with that. Like the facts are, it's so abundantly clear that is what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so the reason I'm really fascinated with this case in particular is my general fascination with the concept of family annihilators. Mm-hmm. And so family annihilators are people who, it's self-explanatory, right? They annihilate their families. And to me, maybe I'm being a wet noodle, but that just seems like very antisocial behavior to kill your entire family.
I think I no, Farz, I think that you're on the right path with that. I think
Good.
that's an al dente noodle is someone who does not murder their family. So
Let's all stick with al dente
okay, great.
in that case. Because there's some situations where people are murderers, and I can completely understand. You know, you catch your spouse with someone and you wipe them out. Don't do that, please. But it makes a lot more sense. Family annihilation is incredible in its ferocity and intensity and everything else. And what also makes this case really interesting is the general makeup of family annihilators. So this stat is from a 2003 study I pulled up. So the numbers are going to be different now, but probably not within a huge statistical margin of error. So out of 71 family murders, 59 were perpetrated by men, so about 83%. 95% of the perpetrators were both men and the heads of the household. So think daddy did it, essentially. In this case, we're going to find out that that's not the situation. So let's go ahead and set the stage. So Lori was born Lori Noreen Cox in June of 1973 in San Bernardino, California. I have nothing against people who've been married a bunch. Totally fine. I've been married and divorced. People get divorced all the time. It's totally acceptable.
Totally.
5 times feels it feels like there's something going on underneath there.
Yeah, she's not like, well, I don't know. She's not like a movie star, right? They get married like 5 or 6 times, but like also like to this, was it any of the same people like over and over again? I think I find that fascinating when people like get divorced, get married to someone new, get divorced again, and then remarry the person from before. So it's like 3 marriages with 2 people, but is it 5 separate guys?
It's 5 separate guys.
Got it.
And I'm just going to start at the top by saying I could tell that Lori Vallow was probably an incredibly attractive woman in her youth, and a lot of people probably gave her a lot of attention. And so if your husband is a wet noodle, theme of the day, then it would be easy to continuously move on from person to person.
Okay, well, so, she's born in 1973. She's not like 100, but fine. Continue.
She's not, no. Okay. So let's digest these marriages a little bit. So 1982, marries a guy named Nelson Gaines.
1982.
1992.
Okay, I was like, she was 9, so that's bad. That's the red flag.
Yeah, big red flag. 92. Okay. 1995, she married someone named William Lagoila.
Okay.
2001, so that one actually lasted a decent amount of time. 2001, she married someone named Joseph Anthony Ryan, much to his bad luck. And in 2006, she married someone named Leland Charles Anthony Vallow. We're going to refer to this person by his name Charles because that's typically what the media calls him, and that's what he goes by in his family.
And he's number 4.
He's number 4.
Okay.
That guy died.
Okay.
2019, she has her 5th marriage to a guy that we're going to be discussing here in a little bit. So she bounced around between marriages quite a bit. And if I was Charles, I probably would have thought a little bit more about how many marriages had happened within that time frame. So if you're counting, that is 3 marriages in 9 years, which is, it seems, again, not misapproaching anyone. And also it's worth noting, going back to the water component of our chat today, that Lori was also raised LDS. So she was a Mormon. So marrying young, having a bunch of kids, it kind of goes with the territory.
That kind of makes sense because, like, I guess if you think you're not allowed to like just like date someone, you have to marry them, But God, that's so much paperwork, and it's just so expensive, and like it's exhausting.
And to Lori's credit, to whatever extent I can give her credit, husband number 3 was physically and sexually abusive, reportedly, to her and her kids.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah. So there's a whole host of problems.
Did he die yet?
He didn't, but he got it in a different way that we'll get to in a moment.
Okay, good. Okay, cool.
So at some point, Lori decides that she's going to tell Charles that she's leaving him. And the circumstances under which she tells him definitely hint to some sort of mental break. So this is going to be the kind of punctuation point of Lori's just a free spirit to what the hell is going on with Lori type of thing. So in January of 2019, again, she's still married to Charles. She told him she didn't want to be with him anymore. and that she was the reincarnation of Joseph Smith. For anybody listening who doesn't know, Joseph Smith was I'm just going to say, charlatan founder of the Church of Latter-day Saints, also known as Mormonism, which we are referring to here as LDS. So she
I'm
went
going
nuts.
to say that's bigger to me than the divorce red flag is I'm a reincarnated person.
If you're Charles, you already got to this point because you ignored the divorce red flag.
Oh my God.
Which is really interesting because if you think about it, I thought reincarnation was a Buddhism or a Hindu belief, and then she's LDS. I'm speaking out of turn here, but it's curious that she's blending and mixing and matching different faiths and belief systems here.
Almost like none of them are true, and you can just
it's
come together.
Almost like that, Taylor, just barely.
Mm-hmm.
So Charles didn't love what he was hearing. Clearly, he tried to have Lori psychologically evaluated, and that didn't go over well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she didn't take to that, shockingly. I can't find any information on what happens during this time. All I know is that she basically disappeared for 58 days. Just gone. Nobody knows where she was. At least on the reports I'm finding. She did have kids.
She's left them.
Yeah, she left them.
Okay.
So that's where we are with this.
Okay.
So a month later, Charles files for divorce. In the divorce filing, he claims that Lori threatened to kill him if he tries to stop her preparations for the second coming of Jesus. 5 months later, in July, and this is where it just blows my mind. In July, Lori's brother, his name's Alex Cox, he shoots and kills Charles, claiming self-defense. Yeah, at that time, these people are psychos. It's absolutely incredible. So at that time, the police accepted that. They were like, yeah, that's what happened. And they just washed their hands of it.
But okay, can I ask some questions? What gun happy state are we in right now?
Arizona.
Okay. Makes sense. And what did he say? What were they shooting at each other? I don't know. Was it a shootout? How did he was he did he say he was trying to kick me, so I shot him with my gun? What kind of self-defense is that?
So we're going to find out a little bit later that Alex, kind of a loose cannon.
Okay.
Alex didn't seem like he needed a lot of motivation to assault or kill somebody.
Great. So I think we should definitely give him guns. I think that he passes the test for me.
Yeah.
Give that man a gun.
Yeah. This family, Lori's side of the family, just sounds like a bunch of psychopaths. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
The part I was going to get to a little bit later, I'll dive into now, is that he also assaulted Lori's third husband. The details of that are also a little bit murky, but apparently he tasered the shit out of this guy. Which
I feel like that guy deserved it, right?
That guy deserved it. Yeah. That guy had it coming. So we're not super sad about that. But it's just the fact that this guy's first instinct in any situation is not talk about it, it's just pull out either a taser or a handgun. And
what weird, speaking of, this is speculation, but why is he his sister's protector in that weird way?
Okay. So I didn't write this in the outline, but apparently Alex and Lori were weirdly sexual with each other in front of people. There was one thing I read about from Alex's ex-wife who said that when Lori and him got together, he would pick her up in that Ryan Gosling, Rachel McAdams notebook way, where he's with the hands on the gas and and they simulate rubbing against each other. They had a weird relationship. These people are not normal.
That's not great. No, I'm okay.
Not great.
Great. I'm glad I asked because confirmed red flag.
Now you have it in your mind. At this point, we're going to rewind a little bit because we need to introduce another character who, surprise, surprise, is husband number 5. 4 years before all this transpired, in 2015, Lori began reading a book by a guy named Chad Daybell, which was self-published because, of course, it was self-published, right?
Very achievable goal.
Very attainable. Yeah.
Yeah.
The book was called Standing in Holy Places. It was a series that he wrote, and I'm going to get into. I actually did read a bit of this book, and I'll tell you my opinion of that in a little bit. Yeah, not fun. 3 years later, they actually met in person for the first time at an event.
So she read his book and then met him later.
Yes, years later.
Okay.
Yeah, apparently she got into this. I'm skipping ahead a little bit. The book is very end of times doomsday. So part of me thinks that like her getting into this book, it could have been innocuous, right? Like I pick books based on what the cover looks like. She probably did the same thing. And she started reading it, and all of a sudden she's like halfway through the series and she's like, oh, like now I'm thinking about the end times and all this. So like I feel like this 2015 interaction of like her getting the books and reading them, it kind of starts that whole process.
And this is before she thinks she's Joseph Smith, or after?
Before.
Okay.
Yeah, 2015 book series starts. 2019, I'm Joseph Smith, and the second coming of Jesus is happening, and I got to prep for it. So yeah, the name of the book, Standing in Holy Places. 3 years later, they met in person at that event. Apparently, like the morals here are relatively lax. So they had a few liaisons after that interaction. Lori would have parties when Charles was out of town. Chad would be there, and then everybody would leave, and then he'd just kind of slink around and stay there. And so she was basically cheating on him. Yeah. And then in November 2018, Lori and Chad actually appeared on a podcast together. So they became friends. Like they became acquaintances, right? Mm-hmm. I'll get to the podcast. I also listen to the podcast.
I think I heard snippets of the podcast, and it continues the crazy, but I'm excited to hear more about it.
It definitely continues the crazy. It sounds like the podcast producers also named the LDS sect that they will eventually be involved in. It's worth noting this is not mainstream Mormonism. Shockingly, the Mormon Church has distanced themselves from these people and this sect, right?
Did God tell them to? Yeah.
Yes, Joseph Smith told them to. It was ordained before you signed your checkbook over to distance yourself. So the podcast was produced by Preparing a People. The name of the podcast itself is Time to Warrior Up. I just hate this dickhead language these people use. It's just it's like, you're not a warrior. Chad looks like a leather skinned swinger from Florida. Like he's not like taking over the world or anything.
Right.
But they all have this vision of themselves, which blows my mind. It's interesting because it sounds like the name of the producer of the podcast, Preparing People, is also the name of the sect that they belong to. It's hard to actually dig into the details here because I tried going to their website and I tried researching the shit out of this. It's all shuttered. Like there is no, like even the webmaster who created the website posted something on there saying, we're just going to remove this and go about our lives. Like we're done with this at this point.
So it was not true. Not true after all.
Yeah, exactly. So going to the podcast, again, I listened to it and the theme is just general religious, like generous religion and nature and the awakening to Jesus. It segues into prepper territory. There's talks of the end time and preparing for the end time. They're just intense, stupid people. You know, it's like the worst combination of everything. It's like having drive, but your drive isn't to make the best sourdough bread. It's to just destroy the entire world or watch it be destroyed. It's awful.
Have you read, obviously, like I love Dan Carlin, the history podcaster, like
love Dan Carlin
more than anything. And I read his book. I've read it 3 years in a row around this time of the end of the year because it kind of like, I don't know, I feel like it sums up a lot of stuff. And I wish it was written post 2020 because it does talk about pandemics, but it's called The End Is Always Near. And it's about people have been doing this for fucking ever, being like,
forever.
You know, oh God, Jesus is coming, or oh no, blah, 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 this is going to happen. And then like scaring people to giving them their stuff and like making sure they're in power. And it's just like such a thing over and over and over again. Yeah.
So that's the interesting thing. I don't think that these people, there was no profit motive here. These people, it's not like they went off and did something great with it. Like you'll find out what they did with it. It wasn't like there was some grand plan. I also love that I wrote here in this outline that as I was listening to this podcast, because there's pictures of them up as they're talking, so you can see the face and the voice match up to each other, and they're like talking this stupid shit. I literally wrote down small dick energy because it is exactly what it is. It's just the worst of the worst.
Totally. And the women are like, ooh, right? They're like loving it. Ugh,
yeah, Lori's cheating on her husband with this fucking moron. Look, if your name is Chad, I don't have anything against you, but he was a Chad. Like, let's be honest. So, and speaking of Chad, so he had some really interesting beliefs, obviously. If I were to summarize him, he's basically like, he's like a sideshow roustabout, a con man. He's a religious zealot. Mm-hmm. He probably owned a bunch of crystals. We don't know for sure. I'm sure he had some gold chains that he wore with his like shirt wide open. Yeah, just not a super appealing person. And on his belief system, he told people, this is where it doesn't totally jive with traditional LDS beliefs. He told people he lived on different planets. So there's some element of him being like this celestial being tied into all this religiosity.
Like he had already done that?
Yeah. So I think, I didn't write it down, but I think it was somewhere around 50 or so planets that he'd lived on.
Oh, good for him.
Yeah, he's been all over the map, apparently. He also had this habit, which was, it speaks a little bit to what you said about like this like desire for power.
Mm-hmm.
He had this habit of categorizing people based on how light or dark they were, but not based on like their skin color. No, it wasn't racist. It was based, it was.
It's not racist, but
it was arguably worse because it led to like a lot of death and tragedy. But he was based off of how light or dark their energy was, and so if you had light energy, like you were in. If you had dark energy, then he just would cast you out. With just very, very interesting mentality there. He told Lori. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I feel like this is the best planet out of 50. There's just no way. Like there has to be one better than this.
Like one that's like
why would you stay here if you had an option of like a bunch of other ones? Like there's got to be one that's better. But continue. Yeah,
if the multiverse is true, then the Jetson actually happened, and so you could be in a flying car.
Yeah, like why now?
He also told Lori that she had lived 21 different lives. Just a lot of stupid shit, and apparently all worked on Lori, because clearly you'll see that she's very, very spent with this guy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting. We're going to introduce another character in this story. Her name is Tammy. So in the middle of all this, and to literally nobody's surprise, Chad was also married at the time.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Chad bounced around a lot less, apparently. They were married for 29 years, so he was taking it seriously up until he didn't. 7 months after Charles is killed by Lori's brother, Alex, Tammy is found dead at her home.
Oh my God, at the bottom of a staircase? That's my guess.
No, I think she was in the bathroom, actually.
Ugh.
Yeah. And this part, again, blows my mind. It just shows how little people care. No autopsy was done because Chad, as her husband, was like, no, I don't want to autopsy, just throw her body in a trench and we'll call it a day, basically.
I mean, obviously, like, Lori was cool with getting divorced. Just fucking get divorced.
Yeah.
Like, don't kill people.
I don't understand.
Like you said, getting divorced is fine. Like, getting divorced a ton, maybe you should talk to a therapist. But, like, don't kill people.
I do have my suspicions that Lori also had Alex kill the husband. So, like, Lori's not, So their lives were colliding in a way that was incredibly destructive at this point.
I do also want to, I guess also Catherine the Great did have her husband killed. So, but that was like, that was a whole other thing, you know.
Everybody was killing everyone back then.
And she went on to do good things. So it wasn't, you know, it could have been worse.
Yeah, it could have been worse. You could have been married to Lori or Chad here.
Yeah.
This part I find like almost comical, although I shouldn't be laughing about it because it's tragic. So before she died, Tammy reported that someone tried to shoot at her when she was in her garage, and she thought it was a paintball gun. I don't know, but I think she was delusional. Like, a paintball gun leaves paint residue, none of which was like someone was trying to kill her. Like, this is right before she's found dead.
I think, well, two quick things. One, my dad did get shot by a paintball gun one time walking down the street, and he thought he was shot by a real gun because he like heard the gun go off. It hurt him, and he looked down, and he like had like a big stain on his shirt, and it was orange. And his first thought was, "Oh my God, I bleed orange."
Okay. We'll give Tammy the benefit of the doubt.
So that I think it was it's confusing when you're under fire. But also for Christmas, my husband bought me a knife with my name engraved in it. So I can't use that knife to kill him because it has my name engraved in it. That's
exactly why he did it too, I'm sure. So obviously there's some parallels happening between Lori and Chad as they start to get closer to each other. And this is around the time that we should introduce the children of Lori into the mix. So there are three. There's Colby Ryan. This was with husband number 2. He's at this point 27 years old. He's not relevant really to this story except for the initial involvement he had in trying to find the other 2 kids.
So, super cute. Like,
I don't know that. I've not seen this man's pictures.
He's very cute. Continue. I just wanted to bring that up.
Listeners, look up Colby Ryan and you can let us know if you also think what Taylor thinks. Colby was adopted by husband number 3. That's why he has the same last name, Ryan, as the guy who was sexually assaulting, abusing, and hurting everyone, basically.
Right. It's terrible.
The other 2 are Tylee Ryan. She was born to actually born to husband number 3 in 2002. And then JJ, who was born in 2012. Now, this was Charles Vallow's great grandnephew, who the couple then adopted as their own. So it was, for whatever reason, they didn't think the families could take care of him, and they adopted him as their own. So on September 8th, Tylee was last seen at Yellowstone with Lori and Alex. Again, Alex is a psycho. Like, why are they taking this child alone into like a national? It just like
he's already killed Charles.
Yeah, he's already killed Charles.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyways, again, like I wrote down here, Lori's brother seems critical to all this stuff. Like, he obviously has incredibly violent tendencies, and now they're just going to go camping alone with this child.
Yeah.
A few weeks later, on September 24th, we're still in 2019, Lori called JJ's school to tell them that he's being withdrawn to be home. We actually don't really know what happened between the 8th and the 24th. There were some discussions about neighbors seeing them packing a car late at night with stuff and like whatever. Like there's, again, the facts haven't come out yet. So this is all speculative. On November 5th, Chad and Lori get married. And this part, again, just blows my mind how incredibly stupid these people are. So they get married 2 weeks after Chad's wife is found dead. So red flag, right?
Oh my God. Wait a month. Jesus Christ.
Yes. Wait 4 weeks after the death of
I'm going to say that's the minimum.
Years.
Yeah.
29 years. It's incredible. So again, this is the part that blows me away. And this has been corroborated. So at the wedding, I guess like people were asking where the kids were, and they told them that Tylee was either dead as of 2017 or that Lori had no children at all.
What? So this part, I know, because I know this part of partially the story, but like I feel like I want to be like, as a parent, this is crazy, but that's as a freaking human being, this is fucking crazy. You know, like I don't get nothing special from being a parent. Like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Like you're lying, and you're like in the weirdest way possible. Like
it's a strange. About? It's a very strange ploy to get out of the fact that you definitely killed these kids.
Just like say they're with someone else. Oh, they're with my friend Beth. I don't know. Like
so they get around to that. But they get around that with the police, not with everybody else. But weird. Obviously, all these facts just stack on top of each other. Again, it's all circumstantial, but you can deduce something out of this this behavior. So, and then this is the part where it all kind of spirals into that scenario. A few weeks after this marriage, JJ's grandma, Kay, she called the police to conduct a welfare check on JJ. Lori then told the police the kid was away with a family friend. Her name's Melanie Gibbs. Again, not to besmirch anybody. Melanie is also on these podcasts if you start looking them up. And again, like just put the face to the voice and hear what they say, and you'll reach your own conclusions about Melanie.
These like the doomsday podcasts.
Yeah. Actually, I think the podcasts were all taken down, so anything you find is going to be archived through YouTube. But still, it's worth just listening for a few minutes just to know that there's people like this that exist in the world.
If I need a little rage boost, I will.
Yeah. Police called Melanie, and they were informed that she hadn't seen JJ in months. The FBI and local police went to search the house the next day, only to find that it had been abandoned. Melanie later confessed to the police that Lori and Chad told her to lie to the police about the whereabouts of JJ. So basically, Lori and Chad called Melanie and was like, hey, people apparently are asking questions about these kids because, oh, my husband's dead at the hands of my brother, and now these kids aren't around, and people are being really suspicious about it. And so they're
asking me where like other people are annoying, you know, like, ugh. It's very Casey Anthony at the hot bod contest.
It is very, very Casey Anthony of them. That is a great reference. We're gonna throw that back. So around December, the police also become aware. So at this point, they're like, we just are looking for JJ because there is nobody else asking about Tylee. Because I guess Tylee's original dad and then later stepfather didn't really care what was going on with Tylee, and Lori obviously didn't care. And so this time, the police don't even know that Tylee's been missing. December, is when they become aware that, oh, there's another kid involved here. What's going on with that one? Yeah. And so at that point, things start unraveling pretty quickly, which it should be because these people are complete idiots. The FBI started looking at Tammy's death more closely. They exhumed the body to conduct an autopsy. We actually don't know what the results of the autopsy are because officials never released that. I'm sure it'll come out during the trial.
That's nice that he didn't have her cremated.
God, what an idiot. I mean,
yeah, if I murder someone, I'm going to have them cremated. That doesn't... There's
such a good point.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, you got that, listeners. If you kill someone, make sure you cremate them.
Yeah.
But don't kill anyone. As the investigation starts narrowing in on them, Lori and Chad decide to book it, basically. They released a statement to their lawyers, which was the stupidest statement I've ever read in my life, about their just loving parents and just everything you would expect of people who are obviously guilty of doing horrific things.
But I don't know where my kids are, but like, come on.
Yeah, exactly. Just look at them. Look how happy they are. Look how free they look.
Oh my God.
So on February 20th of 2020, Lori gets arrested in, I'm going to confess, my favorite vacation destination ever, Kauai, which is an island in Hawaii. She was initially just charged for desertion and non-support of a child because nobody can find the kids. There's no body. There's no evidence of anything. We just know that there was kids and now there's no kids. There's also several misdemeanors that were tacked on her because she was apparently a huge pain in the ass to deal with for the police because obviously. Yeah, so she was extradited. And at this point, she was actually living in Idaho. And so she was extradited back to Idaho and held on $1 million of bail. On June 9th, a search warrant is executed on Chad's home and they find human remains. Chad is then charged with murder. And yeah, and on June 13th, it was confirmed that those remains belong to JJ and Kylie.
Oh, poor babies.
You
can also just like
leave them at the fire station.
Yeah, you can be a bad parent and like get your kids taken away and they go into foster care, which is like not great, but better than being dead.
Yeah. There's also a part of this that so apparently Alex and Chad were on the property at some point and Chad texted Lori that I buried a raccoon or something. Like, we don't know what any of this means, but it sounds like Alex was involved in all this stuff. And so, yeah, that's where things mostly stopped. There was a lot of legal shuffling that happened. Charges were dropped, others were added, bail went up, bail went down. Lori actually was found at one point to be completely incompetent to stand trial. And then later on, that was reversed. It's very interesting. Initially, you can tell that she's not well.
She believes in some pretty crazy shit and she killed her kids. So like, yes. And
editorial stance, I do think she was involved in killing the husband as well. So the trial was originally set for January of 2023. So it was about to happen. Then that date was canceled and it's supposed to be moved up to some date that we do not know yet. This is kind of a crazy story. There's so many things going on that we haven't covered. So there's another piece of this. Again, this family is absolutely incredible. Other facts that came out in the middle of all this was that Lori's nephew-in-law was shot at by someone driving Charles Vallow's car after Charles had died. It's just like,
what?
Yeah. And then Alex, the crazy brother, he died suddenly in 2019. Like after all these deaths presumably happened, it was attributed to natural causes, but there's so much death surrounding this family. It's just kind of nuts. Yeah.
Ew. So no justice for that guy, but he should have been in jail for a long time because he killed someone. But I guess I don't even know, would he ever been in trouble because they already were like, oh, it was self-defense for whatever reason. So I guess.
Well, they never tried him, so it would have been like a double jeopardy situation. So they could have later on discovered it. If they actually gave a shit, they could have looked at phone records and knowing how smart these people are, Lori was probably texting like, Charles is in the front. Yeah, Charles is in the front yard. Nobody's around. Make sure you put it to his temple. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure they would have figured something out.
Good job practicing shooting at Tammy in the garage. When
I was going through and just like researching this family and going all the way in the weeds on this, it occurred to me, and the analogy I came up with was this is basically as if the Bluth family from Arrested Development and the Firefly family from House of a Thousand Corpses came together. Like, they're psychopaths, they're also bumbling and stupid. It's like a weird mix of both.
Right, and they just like believe whatever they want to believe. Do we know how the kids died?
We don't know anything. Yeah,
It just
they
makes me
haven't
so
released
sad
anything.
because, I mean, obviously this is like so sad for the kids, but like, wow, what were they telling the kids? You know, like imagine like living in a house where your parents are like, or whoever, your mom is like, blah, and like the world's gonna end, and I'm don't worry because I'm reincarnated, blah blah blah. Like, do you believe them? I guess because you believe your parents. Like that's as a kid, you're like, okay, so like were the kids afraid? Like were they together when they were killed? Did they know? Hopefully they didn't. It just like I always like go to the worst case of imagining them like being afraid before they died.
Yeah.
And like that just, ugh, that just like makes me sick. I can't imagine.
Yeah, it's the
Babies.
trust they put in their parents,
Yes,
and
yes.
then hopefully not knowing what the hell is going on before it happens.
Yeah, yeah.
So so yeah, I think, I kind of went into conclusion mode here. Again, because the trial has been set, a lot of the details are still, up in the air. I honestly think that the moment this relationship was doomed to go this direction was when she started just even getting reading Chad's books, and then
Mm,
because if it wasn't Chad, I think it would have been someone else. If it wasn't,
mm,
because she started thinking like just uh, the worst version of like an anti-vaxxer out there. Like she just started
yeah.
like putting these pieces together for herself. And if it wasn't Chad, I really do think they would have just done it with someone else. They
Do you
had
think it's her?
I do think. So my take on it is that they had some sort of a positive validation feedback loop between each other.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't say this, but Chad and Tammy, they created that company and had been around for a while. They did the self-publishing. They published all kinds of books. It wasn't just theirs.
Okay, so
Like,
Tammy like also was kind of crazy.
well, yeah, I mean, for
I mean,
sure.
I'm saying like she believes like this like doomsday, end of the world stuff that they're talking about. And so like so Tammy's not like, "Oh, my husband's going crazy." She's like, "No, we're fine. This is what we've always done."
Yeah, basically. But my point on that is that for 29 years, well, I don't know how long the publishing company was around, but they were married for 29 years. So Chad was apparently together enough to hold a marriage together for 29 years, which I haven't done before. And then on top of that, they started and ran this company where Tammy was like the CFO and he was the CEO, and they had like employees and staff,
Yeah,
and they were
yeah.
publishing like I don't know who was the driving force, but it feels like when they came together, they fueled each other
Yeah. Yeah.
in a really bad way.
Yeah.
Um,
Ugh.
so, and again, this is another thing that's like this one's really really interesting to me. So, in March of 2020, after everything happened with Chad and Lori, they're in jail. There's a guy named Brandon Bourdreau. Hopefully, I'm saying that right. He had a child custody dispute with his wife Melanie Pawlowski. I'm doing great here.
Beautiful.
Brandon is Lori's niece's ex-husband. So think of Lori's sibling has a niece, and then
Okay.
that is the ex-husband.
Got it.
So in the filing, Melanie told Brandon that she was concerned for the kids because Lori and Chad believe, quote, their children are possessed and had become zombies, end quote. So this isn't a court filing for a custody battle that has nothing to do with this. This is the part that, this is going to be incredible, okay? So it goes a little bit further. In the filing, literally, they handed this to a clerk of the court. It defines zombies. It defines zombies, and this is all quotes, human bodies that have had their original spirits forced from them and have been possessed by either a demon, a disembodied spirit, or a worm or a slug, end quote. The worm and slug part I don't really get.
No, that makes no sense. What are you talking about? Okay.
Yeah.
They
Yeah. Fascinating.
said that about other people's children?
No, they said that about their own children. I don't know what the relevancy of that is in this child custody battle. Maybe it has to do with like Brandon's judgment of bringing his kids to Chad and Lori's house to hang out after they killed their kids.
Oh, also because at that part I remember from this story is like they would be like, "Oh, you know what? I have bad news. Farz is a zombie," and they'd be like, "Oh no," and then like think that you were a zombie.
Yeah,
but I didn't realize the particulars of how you got there. It's not rise from the dead. There's a worm. I'm a worm now.
Or a slug. Well, the spirit is the worm or the slug. I mean, look, we're already like so far past. Like it's just like
Great.
Yeah. So I actually tried to read another one of the books that Chad produced. It's called The Great Gathering.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in the same series. It's the same series that Lori got obsessed with.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I'm not religious, so I don't actually totally understand this stuff, but it really seems that you have to be essentially a super Mormon to even follow along. It almost reads like the Bible of like, and then Hezekiah of Jerusalem with like, it's just name after, it's just such drab bullshit. I mean, I just see a lot of like carpet in their house. I don't know why, but they probably had a lot of carpet, just like crosses hanging everywhere. Just like, probably had like a really fucked up vibe to it.
A live, laugh, love sign, and like a lot of stuff in Pottery Barn.
No, it was probably more like kill the zombies sign and like had a dagger through it.
And like a beautiful font. Yeah.
Yeah, and just absolutely wackadoo. And the book itself was obviously very end-timey. It's all about the battle of good versus evil. But here's the thing about it that I found interesting was that it wasn't metaphysical. It wasn't like some ethereal, like good versus evil concept of like the nature of good versus evil. It felt physical. It felt like this is happening, and then here are the mechanics of what you do to combat it. Not like prepare your mind for the ultimate battle. None of that shit. Like it was very like
very literal.
Hardcore. Yeah, very literal. It just seemed very matter of fact the way they framed it. So, Taylor, what's your take?
I'm so sad. I'm so sad for those poor kids, because they didn't deserve to have these crazy fucking parents. And the thing that is just the thing that really I think is a red flag for like after all is said and done is all of that weird like, oh, I never had a daughter, or oh, she has been dead for years, or like, oh, I don't know, JJ must be somewhere. Like that kind of like callous casual lying is so crazy. Like it's like you're crazy. Like you can't like that doesn't make any sense that you can like say that out loud and like look at people in the eye and say that. Like something is very, very wrong. So that I think is like, I feel like good job to people who like called the police and stuff, because they're like, this is crazy. I don't know any other word to say it, but like that amount of lying is so weird. So like what else did she do her whole life, that like was like that?
Yeah, like look, if I don't want to answer a question, I just like there's the buffet, I got to get like more shrimp. You know what I mean? Like, find a different way to deflect, but just like sitting there with a stone cold face saying this kid's been dead for 3 years. It's just
It's like forgetting that it existed. Yeah. And then like on her wedding day, 2 weeks after the freaking other wife died, I can't believe people went to that wedding. That's also crazy of their friends, because I feel like if that happened, I'd be like, I feel like my friend Chad is getting married too soon. I'm gonna maybe back out of this one, or like not be involved in the celebration because his wife was just murdered or died of whatever causes. I'm hot now. I'm gonna take off my shirt because I'm just angry. I'm just sad.
Taylor is just taking off her jacket, not her shirt, for the record.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, my outer shirt. But I'm hot and bothered because I'm so sad, and just like it's so frustrating because it's like for what purpose was all this? Like you're saying, like if I'm not going to be super rich, then like what was it for? Like why? Like you're not prepared for the end of the world, because that's not true, and also like you don't have a lot of stuff, and like I don't know, it was just like you said, like ego loop feed each other with it, and like. I'm sure he fucking loved that this like cute little blonde woman was like, I love your book.
I know. As a male, I can attest that when women feed our egos, you can do pretty much anything after that.
Yeah.
So again, you know me, you know that I'm very respectful towards everyone's belief system, but I do think that Mormonism played a pretty big part of this, because if you understand Mormonism, you have to make multiple leaps of faith to get behind it.
Yeah.
And also, I think that it puts you in this infantized state of mind where you're like, to your point, you don't date, you just immediately get married to the first guy because you're horny and you need to like just figure it out. I think Lori in general, because of the way she was raised, had to suspend a lot of disbelief.
Yeah, totally.
And then I think that her introduction to Chad was just the catalyst that took over the train when the conductor jumped off. In his mind, Chad was is God's warrior, and I think that to someone like Lori, that is believable because she's believed so much to that point.
Right. If you already believe some stuff, then like Like, you remember that Abducted in Plain Sight movie? Do you remember
Yeah,
that? Where like the guy told the girl there were aliens after them and all this stuff, and she's like, I already believed in all these like fanciful religious stories, so like, why wouldn't I believe that? You know?
exactly,
It's just
exactly that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Man, poor everyone.
I guess the lesson for me at the end of all this is that if two people with the same brand of crazy meet, maybe slow your roll. Talk to
Yeah.
someone. If your friends are telling you things, listen to them. Although
Mm-hmm.
I never do that. But as a general advice and guidance to everybody else, please do it. So that's it. That's our first episode
Yeah, I
of
also want to
Doomed to
say
Fail.
don't kill your children. At the very bare minimum.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say, or anyone
I mean,
ever.
like maybe kill your husband if he's a shitty emperor and you have better ideas. Like, meh, potato, potato. But like, don't kill your children.
Just yeah. Spouses, take some.
You know,
Children, not so
case
much.
by case basis. Children, no.
Awesome. Well, I think that's
Cyrus?
it.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for joining. And if you have any red flag tales of your own that you'd want to tell us, please send us an email at hi@doomtofailpodcast.com. Thank you.
Thanks.